In today's project, I will use Edward colored photo etch cockpit parts. Use more metal parts from metallic details. Use much more metal parts. Use water slide decals and technical stances from Behemoth and much more, so please sit tight and enjoy. Let's get started. Hello all my YouTube friends, welcome to my channel. This video build will be about the Russian high-speed supersonic interceptor, the MiG-25PDS MiG-25 Foxbat. I've done a quick review and unboxing for this kit lately, so on a shortcut, let's talk about this kit. This ICM kit is probably the best MiG-25 model available these days. It comes with highly detailed parts such as the cockpit, air intakes, landing gear, wheel wells, jet nozzles and air-to-air missiles. The instruction manual contains 83 steps. Every single word step is drawn in detail. The manual also includes 4 camouflage schemes, 2 Soviet and Iraqi and Libyan MiGs from the 80s and 90s. There are 2 decal sheets. On the first are insignias and identification numbers, and on the second are technical stances. Great! I'm super excited! This will be a pleasure to build. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell for not missing any new notifications. Okay, let's start with the build. From the start of the build, I will use photo etch metal parts from Edward and metallic details. I bought these metal parts on eBay for a decent price. The Edward instruction manual leads me to destroy some of the nice details, and some of the molds must be reduced. I gently cut them out with a chisel and a sharp hobby knife and smooth out the surface with a P600 sandpaper. There are some plastic parts that need to be glued together, like the KM1M ejection seat. Beside the cockpit, I also work on the front and main wheel wells. The Edward and metallic detail accessories have plenty of parts, so I can combine them together. Before I apply the colored cockpit metal parts, I must paint the cockpit and all the small details. I don't have the correct color shade. I had to combine 2 colors by mixing Gunze Sangue of Mr. Color C66 bright green and C34 sky blue in a mixed ratio of 30 to 70%. For painting small details, I mostly use thin paintbrushes from Trumpeter or Italeri. I also paint the abraded floor from the pilot's feet. In the end, it won't be visible, but I do it anyway. After painting the small details, I dry brush all cockpit parts with a metallic paint, add a layer of clear varnish and apply a dark wash. The wash will dry out after a few minutes. It can be removed by a cotton swab and an odorless emulsion thinner. Now I can add the Edward colored cockpit metal parts. I finally managed to mix the right color shade. I am satisfied with the result. Some of the parts, like these rudder pedals, are very tiny. I'm using a headband with a magnifying glass for a long time now, and when I work with small parts, it's an invaluable tool. I got used to it so much that I can't work without it anymore. After I glue all Eduard 4H cockpit parts in place, I assemble the whole cockpit together. Well, for such a huge jet, the cockpit is very tiny. The assembly wasn't without problems. Everything sits very tight together. I had to be very careful not to damage the small details. The front landing gear shaft is a part of the cockpit assembly. It's located directly under the cockpit. The front fuselage fit was quite good, but I had to use a lot of pressure as I expected. When I'm already working on the front section of the fuselage, I also assemble the radar cone and add some additional weight. When gluing, I found out that the fit is not so accurate. I'm going to have to fill it up with putty. The fuselage is modified to fit all versions of the MiG-25. Next, I assemble the two big air intakes. The intakes includes lots of parts. They are nicely molded and detailed, but I have a lot of metal accessories for metallic details, so why not use them? The metal parts have excellent rivet and panel detailing. Some metal parts such as these jet turbine parts can be found in sheets of both manufacturers. I simply choose one of those that are better molded. Next, I apply a layer of surfacer, paint the air intakes with a steel color and apply a dark wash. After it's done, I assemble all air intake parts together. The fit is also very tight. Before I glued the parts into place, I had to repeat the dry fit several times. An important part of the gluing of the fuselage is also gluing the main wheel wells. Of course, I also improve them with metal parts. Now I connect the lower part of the fuselage with the front part. The connection was very difficult, and again, the fit is very tight. I had to be very careful not to break anything. there is a small problem. The molds are not accurate. I will have to grind and shape them. There are also large gaps on the air intakes. I will deal with these problems later. First, I complete the fuselage assembly. Next is the wings assembly. For attaching, I use my cheap Rebel modeling clamps. These tools are very helpful and reliable. There is no option for folded flaps, but I want them to be folded. It looks much cooler. Now I glue the wings to the fuselage. I also experiment with new glues like Mr. Cement SP and Tamiya Extra Thin. I like the Mr. Cement glue more. I thought that the wings fit will be better, but there is a big gap showing. It must be filled up with putty. I will come to that step later. Before that, I focused on the jet nozzle assembly and the landing gear legs. And again, I'll combine Edwards and metallic detail photo etch parts together. I also have some resi jet nozzles for this aircraft, but comparison to this build, the assembly is a complete madness. So I will stick to the metal parts. Gluing metal parts to the landing gear legs was a bit difficult. Some metal parts were very brittle and liked to bend and break off very easily. So this work step took me more time than I expected. When I'm already working on the landing gear legs, I will add a few metal parts to the landing gear covers. For comparison, on the left side is a metal part and on the right side is a gear cover from the box. Now it's time to repair the fuselage fit on the lower side. For this work step, I will use my X-Tool micro drill with a grinding tool, chisels and sandpaper. In this work step, I must be very careful. One mistake and I can destroy the whole fit. So I rather progress slowly. Before filling all imperfections with putty, I glue the front cockpit canopy. For filling all gaps, I use Mr. White Putty R. I plan to fill everything. Then I will sand down the putty and continue to glue the small metal parts to the fuselage and wings. After 5 hours of drying time, I can sand down the putty underwater with a P600 and P1000 sandpaper. I rather use smoother sandpapers. I'm not a big fan of rough sanding. The sanding makes a lot of mess. I clean the model with a warm soapy water. Now I can continue on gluing more small PE parts. There were like 60 more small metal parts to glue. The gluing took me almost a whole day. Before the paint job, I glue some more small parts from the kit like landing lights and antennas. Before gluing it to the model with PVA glue, I added some silver paint to the place of assembly. I also glued other antennas and the pitot tube. I realized that the assembly will be worse after the paint job. I just hope I won't break it off during the next steps. For the cockpit's masking, I purchased die-cast flexible masks from Edward. They are precise and wonderful to work with. Next, I cover the air intakes and the wheel wells with a sponge. For uniting the model's plastic surface and the metal parts as a primer, I use Mr. Surfacer 1000. As a first step of the Foxbat's paint job, I apply a pre-shading. The pre-shading is made with a black color. Mostly, the MiG-25 was painted in a light grey color. I'm planning to mix the light grey paint in a 1:5 ratio to leveling thinner. While doing so, I also paint the anti-glare stripe in the front of the cockpit and wheels. The second step of the painting is to paint a huge Tumansky R15B300 engine jet nozzles and all metallic parts like engine covers. I began to paint the jet nozzles with Mr. Color C66 Bright Green. In reality, the jet nozzles are almost burnt into a creamy color, but I will create this effect later with weathering. And of course, I also paint the wheel rims with this paint. The metallic mister colored paints are a little messy. If you touch them after the painting, you will have a metallic film on your fingers. So I must seal them with a glossy varnish coat. I think I would change them and try other color brands as well. For example, Alclad. Now I mask the engine covers with masking tape and continue on painting other metallic surfaces. I repeat these steps 2 more times: metallic paint, varnish and masking. I also mask the anti-glare stripe. In this project, I will switch some work steps. I paint the radar cone and all dark grey surfaces, and again masking with masking tape. And after masking, I finally apply the light grey color. I have a plan to play with the weathering a bit more. I want my model to look more used, so I apply a post shading with a lighter grey tone. The paint scheme is very simple. All Interceptor versions were painted in a combination of dark and light grey colors. I dilute the paint in a 1:5 mixed ratio up to leveling thinner. And now for the long time-consuming post shading. The post shading is applied on every panel separately. I've created the shadings by mixing light grey and white colors. It creates an illusion of more faded paint scheme. After the post shading is done, I mask the whole model except the cockpit. Next, I paint all the small details. They include paintings of the antennas, navigation lights, sensors, and much more. When it's done, I seal the whole paint job with a glossy varnish coat. Now for the decals. I have a big decal set from Begemma. It includes 2 decal sheets. One are insignias and numbers, and the other are technical stances. And of course, the kit's original decals come in handy too. Some of the Begemma's decals were too blurry, so I combined them with the ICMs. There were like 200 decals. It took me 4 days to apply them all. To continue on the weathering, I sealed decals with another layer of glossy varnish. This time I want to have a dark grey pen lining. I simply combine black and grey panoline washes from Tamiya. For applying, I use a number 3 paintbrush from Revell. To remove the excessive wash from the surface of the model, I use a M&A odorless thinner from MiG-25PDS. This project will be a testbed for the weathering pencils from AK. I never used them before, and of course I will use oil paints and pigments. First, I will use oil paints. The paint applied on this model is a mix of white, black and burnt umber. I apply a small amount of paint on the area of the application, and then I blend the oil paint with a paintbrush soaked in the M&A thinner. The procedure is repeated several times with a thin and a flat paintbrush. The goal is to create a faded, flown and also dirty surface. It's very time-expensive work. The pros of this technique is that you can repeat this step many times, and when you're satisfied with the result, you can move to another area. At the end, you can also use a wet cotton swab and clean a few panels. Now I use the weathering pencils. I imitate scratches and peel off camo paint. I'm still in testing mode, but I already like them a lot. I'm planning plenty of projects in the future, so I can slowly learn more and more about them. I'd like to thank my YouTube friend Aleš for the recommendation of this product. Thanks, buddy! For the wheels and underbelly I use European Earth dry pigments from MiG-25PDS. At the end of the weathering procedure, I again weather the inner side of the jet nozzles with oil paint. I almost forgot to paint the R-40T air-to-air missiles. The painting is quite strange. It's a combination of titanium gold and white. Don't worry, the titanium gold appears to look very goldy, but in real life it's much darker. Somehow, I like this combination. The model is fully weathered, so I seal the weathering with Misticolor GX114 Super Soft Matte Varnish. The assembly was quite good, but it took me more time than expected. Some parts have fit problems. I had to cut some plastic. Most of the cutting was on the landing gear covers. After some modification, it was fine. I also added the huge underbelly fuel tank. The model looks much better with it. Next, I glue the vertical stabilizers, the R-40T air-to-air missiles, and the cockpit canopy. At the very end, I glue and paint the additional small details like antennas and sensors. Great! The ICM's 1:72 scale Mikan Gurevich MiG-25PDS is finally finished. With some breaks, the build of this model took me 3 months to complete. It was a very demanding project. This build bothered me, but it also pleased me. After all, I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I hope you liked this video build. Please subscribe to my channel, like, or leave a comment down below. If you're interested to see more of my work, join me on Facebook or Instagram. There's a link in the description. Thank you for watching guys, and see you next time!